Hi everybody, welcome to Caketastic Cakes. It's Jen and I'm going to show you today how to make this Cory Carson and his little sister Chrissy cake from start to finish here. And if you find this video helpful, please like and subscribe, and here we go. Alright, first we're going to start with the backdrop of those big tall mountains. He has a very mountainous village that he lives in, or town, or that they live in I should say. So I'm going to make two of the big green rolling hills to put for the background of the cake. I'm using gum paste for this because I want it to dry and be nice and firm and stiff. So I just rolled it out about the thickness of my little wooden paint stirrers there and just cut a dome, make it nice and flat, very flat on the bottom. Nice dome on the top. One was bigger than the other. And then what I did was I laid them on pots that I had with a paper towel under it so it would dry curved and it would fit the cake. Now, my cake is just a regular old standard 8-inch cake. It's, I think, about 3 inches tall, and again, 8 inches in diameter. And I have it in the fridge. It's all iced and ready to go. I rolled out my fondant, as you saw while I was chit-chatting it up here. Laid it over my cake, smoothed down the sides. No big deal. Nice and simple. Try to get your edges as nice and clean as you can. And when you're ready, trim off the extra. I use my pizza cutter, as you saw, just because that's what I have, and it works very well. So again, trim off the extra, lift it off, and then get out your fondant paddles and smooth, smooth, smooth. Alright, for our next step, we're going to make the road that goes down the center of the cake. I have some gray fondant this time, but again, it is fondant because fondant covers the cake, gum paste decorates the cake, okay? Anyway, so I have my gray fondant that I'm rolling out pretty darn thin here. I'm not going to go ahead and measure it because I don't care how even it is. I want it thin. So I'm trying to go as thin as I can while still being able to lift it without it tearing or anything. I cut it at a nice angle, almost triangular, as you can see here. I'm going to flatten off the top, or excuse me, the bottom. This is the bottom of it. And I'm going to just nice and gently flip it over my little rolling pin there, like that. And then I'm going to lay it over the cake like that. And just by chance it happens to reach the back of the cake. I am notorious for not measuring things, and I probably should have measured because that would have made sure it reached the back of the cake. But fortunately, the luck and the blessings of the cake gods were with me, and it made it to the back. It reached, so hooray! And as you can see, I'm now cutting out some yellow fondant. These are going to be the stripes on the road because his world is full of roads. And I'm doing it the same way I did the road itself, so it tapers. It's wider at the bottom. It becomes narrower the further back you go, and I made the stripes so that they were kind of long in the beginning, and they get shorter as you go back because I'm doing like forced depth perception and stuff and art terms and things that, you know, make it look more amazing in my head anyway. Okay. And now I am jumping around again. This is more of the green gum paste, and this is going to go on the mountains again, the ones that I have sitting on my pots, so that when they dry, what I did was I laid my pot sideways and then laid the decorations over them, going up and down the pot, so that way they'll be curved and fit the shape of the cake. And I put a paper towel under it so it won't just stick to the pots. Anyway, while I'm doing that, while those are setting up, I've cut out a bunch of circles, 2 different sizes, and I'm just cutting out some triangles, just some little triangles, because if you are familiar with the show, in the background, he has all these little hills and rolling mountains and stuff, and they always have these little triangle pine trees and circular deciduous trees on them, so that is what I'm going for. Now I'm going to make a couple of regular old pine trees to have on top of the cake. So I've rolled out that same green gum paste, still working with gum paste. I made 4 of my large wiggly circles there, scallop circles I guess, and 3 of my small ones. So I put a piece of brown gum paste at the bottom of my lollipop stick. The lollipop stick is just sticking in a piece of styrofoam because that's how I work with it. I wrap a band of brown gum paste around the lollipop stick and then slide one of my green rings down on top of it and then do it again. I'm starting with the big ones first, the big green ones, and then I just keep putting another band of brown in between, and this lets them sit up off of each other and kind of stick out a little bit, and if you see through, you're just going to see the brown of the tree, so no harm, no foul. When I reach the top, I make one last brown piece, trim it off flat with the top, as you saw there, trimmed off my lollipop stick, and just fold the last one over the top. And there you go, right, nice simple pine trees. Okay, here are my green hills. They've had some time to set, so as you can see, they are, know, holding their shape pretty well. That one was a little wobbly, so I had to trim off some extra to make sure it sat flat. And I'm going to have them overlap. Now, while I'm working with this, I don't want them to lose their shape or crack because they will become damaged if they do crack at this point or bend to go flat. So I rolled a towel. I took a dish towel and rolled up the two ends of it so it made like a nice curved cradle for it to sit in. And I am just randomly sticking some big circles and some small circles and some triangles on it. And you can see they're two different sizes, my hills there. I want them to overlap, so I'm not going to put any of my circles or triangles where it will overlap. And I will then decorate the other one. I'm going to just go ahead and fill it all in with the rest of my pieces because why not? And we're going to start the cars now. I'm going to start with Chrissy's body. I've got a big old wad of green here. It's a light green color. And I'm going to make it kind of into a big old, sort of like an egg. And once I get that shape going, I'm going to press down on either end with my fingers in order to make like a big old lump in the middle because the cars in the show have enormous, I guess, heads. I guess they're the heads of the cars. They stand up very big and tall, so I'm going to try to do that here with Chrissy. So press down. I'm pressing down on the sides. I'm going to press down more in the front there, which I guess is toward the left. And I'm using my little paintbrush here, the handle of it, to just kind of roll out the sides because she does have a bit of a ridge that goes around the center of her car, the cab, I guess, of her car. And so that's what I'm trying to do, try to make it stick out a little bit. I guess, like looking back on this, you could probably make just the base of her car and then do the cab separate, and then you could make it as tall as you want and just set the one on top of the other. It might have been a little easier, honestly, because looking at her now, I feel like maybe it isn't as big as it really should be, even though it is pretty big, but it probably could be better. So just something to consider if you guys decide to try this for yourselves. I flattened off the front there with the hood of the truck, or of the car, excuse me, not a truck. And I've flattened it. I tried to make it nice and tall, and the back is more rounded and smooths down into the trunk area of the vehicle. And I'm just more rounding it off, making sure it's flat right where it meets the hood. And I am now using my knife to kind of trace out where the windshield is going to be. She doesn't have any side windows or anything like that, so I just got to focus on the main windshield. So I outlined where it's going to be, and now I'm going to use my tool here and follow the seam that I made and just press inward. So I'm going to have a recessed area when it's all said and done that I will then, fill in with white gum paste, and that way it won't stick out as much, so it might look a little bit better. If you guys have seen my other video on Go Cory Carson, where I actually made Cory, his windshield sits right on top, and it just doesn't look quite as good. If you can recess it, go ahead and try to. I'm using a veining tool to mark out just the lines of the hood and the trunk, and if you see, they kind of go down toward the center a little bit, so be careful if you put them on there, how you angle your lines. Now I'm working on the windshield. I got some white gum paste, rolled it out pretty darn thin. I cut the flat line as you saw, held it up to the windshield, trimmed some away. I used a rounded off tool for the top there so that she has a nice little curve to the top of her windshield, and then just kind of press it into place. A little bit of water if it doesn't stick too well, and you're good to go. All right, these are paper towels. I cut out a bunch of paper. I took a couple paper towels and folded them up and then trimmed around the edge of her size. So that way now she is lifted off the ground because I need to make her tires and put them underneath her so that they can dry attached to her. But I can't let any weight be supported on those tires yet because they're too soft and they would just smush under her enormous weight. Because just like every other preschool show, these guys have enormous bodies and heads and tiny little tires or legs. So I am giving her some artificial support, and I have the paper towels trimmed so that when I put the tires up next to the body, it'll actually fit underneath a little bit and it'll just look right. So I got my 4 tires, my 4 black pieces of gum paste that I cut out with circle cutter. I hollowed out the center as you saw with that little, tool that I used. And now I am filling each one with a little bit of white gum paste. She has a lot of white showing in these tires, so make sure you add a lot of white gum paste to it. You just really want basically a ring of black around the outside to show. So make sure you fill it up. And if you have to add a little bit more, just go back and add more. No problem. So once you get your tires all done, it is time to add, the trim around the base of her vehicle. It's not a bumper. It's maybe, not a fender, trim. It's trim. So the way her trim goes is it goes nice and flat, and then it has two lumps up where it goes around the tires. So I created one here. I just made, a couple lumps that I thought would fit the side of her. You see, like that? And it does. So that's good. That's good. And this one works too. But the other two sides are too long. The long, thin stretches in the middle. So I'm trimming them down so they'll fit each other properly. And then I'm going to take the two pieces that I trimmed, put them back on top of my one piece of gum paste that I still have sitting there, and I've just made a template. Now when I wrap it around, it'll fit all the way around, and I can connect it with one little seam in the back that no one will even notice. So yeah, I don't know if I made that easier or more complicated, but I only have one seam, and once I press it all into place, you see the tires and everything match up. So I think it worked. I think it was a good idea. So that's what I did. Added some water to it, stick it around. You can see the little waves on the side just where they're supposed to be. Using my little scissors, trim it off, seal up that little seam in the back. There you go. There you go. Now she's got her little trim. All right, I'm using the same size circle cutter that I made the tires with, and I'm kind of gouging into the side of her. And now I'm ripping away, just ripping chunks out. I went through the white completely and a little bit into the green, so I'm not going deep or anything. But it's enough now that when I put the tire in, it will sit more underneath her body instead of sticking out to the side of her body. She's not like a go-kart or something. They actually go underneath her, but the entire tire needs to show. So here you go. Not too bad, right? And she is still sitting on her paper towel, so don't take those off for, a couple days. She is solid. You could try hollowing her out if you want. I fear you might lose some of her structural integrity if you do, or her shape. So I'm not too sure, but take the time to let her dry properly before you use her and take the support out from under her. I'm making her headlights right now. It was just two ovals of white that I made a little hollow in the middle of, and then filled with some gold gum paste, a little bit of water on the front of the car there, another little bit of water, and there you go. Stick them into place, and they kind of go down and match up with the lines from the hood, you see? See how it all just comes together like that? It's amazing. All right, I'm going to make her grill now. This is a darker green. I don't know if you can really tell, but it is a dark green gum paste. I just trimmed out a size I thought might work, and it was a little too big, so I'm trimming off a little bit more. And now that I'm rounding off the corners at the top there, because she has it kind of sloped and arced, it's not real sharp. I pressed a couple of lines in with my little tool that my arm was totally blocking, so I didn't bother showing you the top of my arm. And then stick it into place. Yeah, just like that. She has, I don't know what's underneath her, if she has a little hitch or something. My kids are too big, so I don't watch the show, but I cut a little white rectangle and stuck it under the front of her just because it was there. And the last touch I'm putting on her is going to be her face. So two little black balls of gum paste, kind of close together, not too far, and make sure they're very, very symmetrical. She has not a lot going on as far as details, so try to be real careful with the few that she does have. She has a little tiny, very gentle smile that goes between the eyes. It doesn't go above or, below or above. It goes between. Now I'm going to show you one more thing. I'm going to make her little back license plate, I guess it is. So I'm using the same green as the front to kind of cut my angled rectangle, and I'm going to give her a couple of brake lights. So I just took one ball of red, split it in half as best I can to make them nice, even, two smaller balls. Press them on. There you go. You got yourself a Chrissy. Now we're going to move on to her brother.
Now to make Cory, I took a big blob of orange and I'm starting to make a Cory shape out of it. I'm just kind of lifting up in the middle, I don't know, making almost like a giant stamp or something out of him. So you've got the bottom part that flares out in the front, especially a little bit toward the back, not really on the sides at all. And the front, where his windshield will be, is going to go kind of upwards, and then the roof of his cab of his car body thing, it's more rounded over. Okay, so just nice and round. He doesn't have too many sharp edges. I'm using this lollipop stick to kind of give him the indentations where his hood sits. It kind of outlines like his headlights and a little bit of his hood. Now I'm going to give him his racing stripes. This is just light orange. I just took the same color orange and added some white to it. He has one big one that goes right down the middle of him, and then he has two smaller ones on either side. So I just rolled it out real thin. Freehand cut a stripe, a thick stripe, whatever looks good. And then I'm going to do the same, attach it with a little bit of water, just like that, when you get it all lined up. And then I'm going to do the same again and make two little thin slices, make two little thin stripes for either side. And when you get to the hood where the windshield is going to be, just cut it with your knife. So just trim it right off there because that's going to be filled in with white pretty soon. And for the rest of them, just go right down his back and right over his bumper. When we add, I don't even know what those red things are, as license plates maybe, or where the license plates goes. Onto the front or the back of them, we're going to trim off a little bit of the racing stripes, but for now, it's just fine. Don't worry about it. We're going to put his windshield on now. And I just took some white, kind of cut out a real thin piece, held it up as you see, and just started kind of marking off trimming it off where I felt like it would fit. His windshield is pretty rounded, that's why I'm using my circle cutter here. I got kind of the shape that I wanted on the one side, so I'm just going to measure up to the other side and put a little mark. And that way I'll know where to cut on the other side. And those two little top pieces I'm going to cut, just kind of round them off. And it'll be just fine, okay? Stick it on with a little bit of water again, line it up with your little racing stripes on the bottom, and there you go. All right, he's already coming together. Okay, we're going to do his side windows now. Same idea as before, the same really thin piece of white. You're going to have a 90-degree angle on the one end, and he curves over and down, so that's why I'm using the circle cutter again, just to kind of get me a guideline. Once you find a good size, flip it over, and then you can use it as a template to make the other side. I also trimmed off a little bit on the end. You saw me cut a little bit there because it wasn't quite as pointed on the back end toward the bumper as I originally thought it was going to be. Okay, so just stick it on the one side with a little bit of water, stick it on the other side with a little bit of water, press them into place, and you're good. Now, as far as this goes, I would recommend that you take your veining tool or something and kind of make an indentation into the orange of the body of the car where your windows are going to sit, and then put them in so the windows don't stick out the way they do here. I didn't think it out well enough, and I should have done that, so I'm telling you guys to do it so that yours will come out better than mine. Okay, now we're going to do his headlights. These are just two different size circles, the same orange as his body, and just some white. They're just one set size different from each other so that it looks like it's outlined in white. And his headlights aren't perfectly circular like this, so I'm using my knife as you see here, and I'm kind of just smooshing it, kind of making it more oval. And once you get it to a good size and a good ovalness, then stick them on the front of the car, a little bit of water. Make sure they're on the front though. They don't go up high onto his hood. They do stay a little bit lower and more toward the front. That's the only thing you really got to be aware of. And also make sure you don't have any little raggedy ends. That's what I was trying to do there, smooth off the ends from my circle cutters. Okay, so yeah, there you go. He's coming together, not too shabby. Here's the red license plate kind of thing I was talking about before. I'm just going to cut out kind of a slanted rectangle, not too big, it's just smaller, it's just there, there's nothing on it, so it's not hard to do. Make it a little bit rounded off at the top, like you see me doing there with the knife. And when you have it to a good size, stick it on the front. I trimmed off the orange, the light orange of the racing stripes, that's why my little X-Acto knife is sitting there. So that it would sit up, the red would sit up against it, but not be overlapping it, because it would make weird lumps in the red if you did that. Okay, I added the eyes on to him. I don't know where they went, but the footage, I mean. It was just two black circles. I stuck them on there, and I flattened, just pressed upwards against the bottom of it to make it look a little flatter. Rolled out two skinny little pieces of gum paste for his eyebrows. Just make sure they're nice and curved, because he's got very curve-friendly kind of eyebrows. And since the entire windshield is his face, I'm going to add kind of a happy mouth here. As you saw with the red, I cut a circle out of it with a flat top. That color right there is pink. It's just a little circle for pink. That's going to be his tongue. You see how I tucked it in there after I took a nip out of it out of the red with it first? So it just fits right in there. That's a little piece of white for his teeth, because I just found a picture that I liked how his mouth was. I thought it would look cute. So I'm just trimming, I just stuck it on top of the red, and I trimmed out around it with my X-Acto knife. So now when I stick it on his windshield face, there's the red first. Here comes the teeth. And I gotta adjust them because they were crooked. And then I'm going to use my knife to get that off because it was sticking. And then I'm going to add the little pink tongue to it. This way, when you put the mouth on, you're not going to have like 2 or 3 different layers sticking out. It's all going to be flat in one layer. So just adjust it however you need, tuck it all together, and there you go. Now you can actually see it a little better focus, right? Okay, now we're going to add the back side of him. We're going to add his little back plate. The same thing as before. Here you can actually see where I cut it off. I'm just trimming it off to whatever size I think would look good. You got to do it carefully because those thin racing stripes dried on me really quickly, so I don't know how yours will be, of course, but if they do dry quickly, be careful that you don't crack them and break it, so cut very carefully. And same with the tail lights that we did with the headlights, just white circles on top of slightly smaller orange circles. These are overall smaller than the headlights, and they stay round because they're just little, rear lights. They're nothing big or special like the front. So while you got to be careful to do them right, they don't have to be big and they don't have to be, oval or anything. Okay, I am going to give him kind of a lift now. We have to add the tires and the white bumper that goes around his whole frame. And the way he is right now, he's just too short. So I'm putting this layer of white underneath of him. It's maybe 1/4 of an inch thick. It's not too thick, but it's there. And it's going to hold him up and also give me something to attach the bumper to. I'm hollowing out the center there because he is so big and thick. I had turned him upside down and using a knife, I hollowed out, a big bunch of the inside of him so he's not a big solid mass. You're going to see it later on. You'll get a little glimpse of how I did it. There you go. You can kind of see inside his body right there. This just allows him to not be quite so heavy. It allows him to dry a little easier, and he won't put a giant dent in the cake now when I set him on top of it. Now we're going to make his tires. I had to let him sit overnight, guys, okay? So he's another one that's going to take a couple days to make. You can't just rush through him because he's just plain old too heavy, especially if he's going to be sitting on tires like I'm going to show you here. So I rolled out the black. It's, again, probably 1/4 of an inch, a little bit more thick. Put a little bit of a dent in it with my ball tool, and then I'm using some very skinny white to put, I don't know what that's called, the center in his tires. They're not really hubcaps. We'll call them hubcaps. All right, they're kind of hubcaps. There's little white hubcaps. Now put those in the center, kind of roll them into place so that they sit nicely. And because they're going to be underneath of him the way he is, I'm going to just trim the edge off so it has a flat surface. Almost halfway, maybe 3/4 of the way, I'm going to trim the tire. And I'm using the same piece to try to make it more even of a cut. So you saw what I did there, and when we put them together, he's going to sit on them just like that. See? He's coming together. Okay. All right, now we're going to make 2 more tires, which you already know how to do. Roll out your black, cut out circles, put little white circles on top, and then trim them. I'm doing this to just see that they're all kind of the same height because I don't need an odd tire, which that one was. So trim it down, line them up, and if they look good, then we're doing okay. Okay, get some lollipop sticks that I trimmed. They're maybe, an inch long, 1.5 inches maybe, and I'm sticking them through the tire until I can feel it against my finger on the bottom of the tire because this is going to support the weight, so you need the lollipop stick to actually be touching the countertop or the cake or whatever it is you're working with. Okay, you don't want it sitting through because that's just going to sink. When you put the weight of it onto it, it'll sink right through the tire and smush the tire and ruin it. So you don't want that. So the lollipop stick has to go all the way to your finger on the bottom of the tire. Stick it on up in the car. And once again, let them dry if you need to. Let them settle. And now for the last part, we're going to add his little white bumper that goes around his whole entire body. I rolled out some white pretty thin, not too thin, but pretty thin. Cut it to a nice length and a really good width. As you could see, I actually made sure that it fits. I was careful this time. All those times I almost got burned. This time I was careful. I put some water on it. I'm just wrapping it around to help cover up that lift, that white lift we put on him earlier, as well as the seam between his orange body and the tires. So trim off the extra, press it into place, and you should be good.
All right, now that we got our Cory and our Chrissy and we let them set up, so maybe make them a day or 2 in advance. Seriously, they need time. It's time to put them on the cake. So you set them where you want them. Stick your tree on either side. As you can see, I'm trimming off a little bit extra from my lollipop stick. Whatever you need to do. I'm cleaning up my cake plate. Got to get all those fingerprints off. And now here come my 2 mountains for the background. My nice rolling hills with the trees all over them. I have them overlapped just like you can see, sort of, because the angle's a little rough, I'm sorry. And just because I felt like it needed more color, I have these little flowers, these gum paste flowers that I always make a ton of in different colors just because you never know when you need a little splash of color somewhere. So I'm adding a couple little flowers here and there on either side just to brighten it up, make it pretty, make it special, and Cory and Chrissy are ready to go. How cute is that, right? So thank you for watching this very long video, but very informative video, I hope. And please check out my many other videos I've got out there. And as always, thank you very much for watching Caketastic Cakes.